Hello, my name is Owen Nelson and I am currently the Supervisor of Marking for the HSC Music Performance Examinations. Welcome to the 2020 Virtual Encore Performance Program. I'm joined by some of the students to talk about their creative processes and what made these performances stand out. Please welcome Narissa from Engadine High School, who studied Music 1, Sarah from Tara Anglican School for Girls, Music 1, Thomas from Smiths Hill High School, who studied Music 2 and Music Extension, and Matthew from Shaw Sydney Church of England Grammar School, who studied Music 2 and Music Extension. And through the magic of Zoom, Luke Furbank from Denison College of Secondary Education, Kelso High Campus, who studied Music 1. Narissa, tell us the name of the piece you were selected to perform in Encore, and how would you best describe the piece and what other pieces made up your program?
Well, originally, before COVID hit, and before the restrictions, I was going to do like a lot of ensemble pieces with like my a cappella group at school. So I was looking at a lot of like contemporary, alternative kind of stuff, and also a lot of soul stuff like Sweet Honey in the Rock. Yeah. And in year 11, my history teacher showed me Loved by You and said that they'd really like to hear me sing it. And so I sat down and listened to it with my music teacher, and we heard it and we were like, I have to do that for my HSC. And it was in that moment that I decided that I wanted to have my dad accompany me as well. Once the restrictions came in and it was like a one person accompanist, I stuck with Summertime. It was going to be an ensemble piece, but I stuck with it because I really liked that like soul aspect, that jazz aspect. And Goodbye Yellow Brick Road, I also really liked because it fit in with that like vulnerability. And I had a connection with all the songs that I picked, which was really good.
Thank you.
So I was selected to perform Superstition, originally composed by Stevie Wonder, but arranged by myself from inspirations like Stevie Ray Vaughan. So it was a real funky arrangement and added a lot of contrast in my repertoire. So I arranged Superstition in a way that I could showcase my own style of guitar playing and still exhibit Stevie Wonder's creative intelligence with the lyrical component, as well as my own spin on the main riff too. So I wanted to make the arrangement really unique. So I did Helpless by John Mayer, Voodoo Child by Jimi Hendrix, and a more intimate one, When the War is Over by Ian Moss.
Luke, you used a backing track for your performance. How did you arrange this and how did you organise the track?
I have to admit, I was incredibly picky with my backing track. I'd already had some studio experience prior to the HSC years, so that definitely helped lay down the basics. And originally I had plans to perform with a band behind me, but COVID-19 had restricted the use of accompaniment, obviously. The first step was actually arrange the songs and notate the drum patterns, bass grooves, rhythm guitar, everything that I needed to bring the backing track to life pretty much. So everything was recorded at home, and some nights I could be sitting at my desk redoing simple things like tambourine tracks just because it wasn't perfect and it wasn't sitting right in my ears. The aim for the mixing and editing process was to make it sound as live as possible. And there's parts in there like it's natural for the bass player to hit a note every now and then, and it's natural for the drum player to miss the snare hit or something. So those human embellishments, I guess, are in there and makes it sound more live and a more unique performance, I think.
The piece I got selected for was a piece called Lush Life, and it's composed by Billy Strayhorn, and it's a really heartbreaking, really. It's this character that has this ironic, what's supposed to be this lush life that ends up being really dreadful. And so it's been a really great piece for me to explore because the character's so fun to play. The other pieces I did in my program were two pieces from musicals. So I did I'm Here from The Colour Purple, Holding to the Ground from Falsettos, and I also performed a vocalese of Billy's Bounce.
Sarah, you have an interest in jazz vocal style. How is this different to other styles you've encountered, and how did your interest develop?
I mean, I've been doing a lot of listening this year, specifically practicing for the written HSC paper, and so I've certainly encountered a lot of different styles of music through that. And just going back and listening to more music, specifically like, you know, the classic vocal singers in jazz like Ella Fitzgerald, Sarah Vaughan, Frank Sinatra, you know, all the classics. Just going back to the basics, really listening to who they listen to, and then listening to newer people like Emma Pask, for example. And so, yeah, vocal style's certainly been shaped by a lot of different musicians. Jazz is, it can be quite similar and very different also from a lot of different styles of music. I find that actually jazz and musical theatre are very, very similar in terms of telling a story and creating a really big shape.
The piece I performed was called Jabrizzi, and it was by a man called Nigel Edwards, who's actually my clarinet teacher. It's an original composition by him, and it was useful because I was able to perform it as part of my Australian piece in the last 25 years. It's quite an interesting piece because I think it kind of encapsulates the idea of Australian multiculturalism, because it's kind of got so many different influences, you know, from the pop sphere as well as different cultural influences. For example, he said he was inspired by the Jabrizzi beetle from the Dr. Dolittle film, not the one with Robert Downey Jr. that, you know, flopped, the original. And it kind of scurries about everywhere and goes off and does things, and that's kind of what the piece does. You know, it starts off really slow and somber and kind of walking around, and then it jumps around and there's kind of South American jungle influences with a bit of samba style. I played a concerto by Franz Krommer, a sonata by Javier Lefebvre, and then for my extension music, which was essentially a period a week where I got to work and practice and just explore my styles, it was a sonata by Franz Poulenc, as well as a Carnival of Venice variations by Almiro Gampieri.
How have you approached any challenges you have faced during your HSC year to reach your goals in HSC music performance?
On the whole, it's been a difficult HSC year. Obviously, we had COVID, we've had many disruptions, and I think getting through that, it's most important to not get overcome by anxiety and just kind of focus on other things. For example, music was really important to me, and so, you know, diving into that as well as sport, it really helped you get through it. So I guess the loss of my grandparents in close succession was kind of hard because they always supported my musical career. They in fact purchased the clarinet that I played on for the performance. Luckily enough, I was able to perform Jabrizzi for them before they passed away. And so, you know, pushing through the musical performances every time, you know, thinking about them, and it was able to add another colour, I feel like, to the music.
Yeah.
So the piece I was selected to perform in Encore was the Zigeunerweisen by Sarasate. So this piece was heavily influenced by lots of Hungarian folk tunes, so you'll probably hear that throughout the piece. So initially the piece begins off, you know, very flamboyant, it's very virtuosic as well, and then you have a very, I would say, very solemn middle section. It's very heart-pulling, and it's very upsetting as well. It's very passionate. And then the piece culminates in this very exciting and very animated finale. And the other pieces I was performing for my HSC. So for Music 2, for the mandatory topic, I performed Stuart Greenbaum's Infinite Heartbeat from his 2 interludes in Space violin sonata. So that's a very introspective and very atmospheric piece. So it was a very big change from all of the other, you know, romantic big concerto pieces I was playing. So I was able to explore different styles and different techniques in playing that. And then I played the Bruch Violin Concerto, the 3rd movement from that, which is arguably my favourite work of violin ever, just because, you know, it has everything that you need to do in violin. Yeah. And then for the other piece of my Music 2 repertoire, I played the Brahms Violin Sonata No. 2, and I played the 2nd movement from that, just for something contrasting, something that was slow, very romantic, and still very passionate. And then for my last extension piece, I played the Dvorak Romance. So just to continue on with, you know, a different side of European culture, you know, that more Eastern side, where you could explore, you know, different sounds, whilst also still being able to play the music that I love as well.
How did you plan rehearsals with your accompanist, and how often did you rehearse? And for you, what are the key components of a good rehearsal?
I had weekly rehearsals and made sure it was consistently weekly, just for about an hour each week. And then in planning for rehearsals, I thought it was very important when we first started off to work on the parts of the music that we thought would be the most problematic or most difficult to get together. And then after that, we would play through each piece individually just to make sure that, everything is progressing well, that we have things down pat. And then towards the exams, we would play through the entire program as a whole without breaks, just to, acclimatize ourselves to performing the entire program without having any breaks. So then if we get to the performance, we're well conditioned for that. And then after that, we would then go over the things that we had trouble with, and then go through the usual typical passages that we always had difficulties with. For me, what made a really good rehearsal, or what the key component is, I think there are many components for me that were really important. I think making sure that you know your own part well, and then also on top of that, you need to know your accompanist parts really well, just so you know how each part fits in with each other, and to make sure they have an understanding of what's going on in the music at all times. And then attached to that, I think that also researching your music through, listening to recordings to get different interpretations from people, I found that really useful. So it gave me an idea of what worked, or what I liked and what I didn't like, so I could form my own unique interpretation of the piece. And from that, I was able to, in my rehearsals, make them more effective, because I was able to say, I would like this here. So I was able to direct the rehearsals more. And I think the last thing for me was experimenting in rehearsals. I always thought that was one of the most important things, changing the balance here and there, bring out the harmonies more, especially in the Dvorak romance. It's such a harmony-driven piece. And I think, changing the balance to bring out certain notes more, it changes the color of, the piece entirely. So things like that, also changing the balance to explore different rhythmic features as well, to highlight things, to bring that up more. So experimenting really gave me that opportunity to take my performance to the next level, have my own personal voice as well, not just being influenced by all these other recordings that I listen to.
Okay, thank you. I would like to ask each of you one last question. Luke, what is the best piece of advice you were given regarding your HSC preparations?
The best bit of advice I was given was to really choose songs that you're not going to ever get sick of and that your ears aren't going to get tired of doing. When you're practicing songs for 2 to 3 hours every single day, you need to be motivated to be doing what you need to do. You can really take the music course to a whole new level, so that you can do your absolute best. And it's so important that you do not change your songs every single month just because your ears are so used to the song.
Perform as much as you can. I know COVID makes it really difficult at the moment to go out and perform, but try and get yourself in front of audiences as much as possible, in front of your family, in front of your friends. Just try and practice your pieces in front of people, because that's the proper way that you'll get to have really good performance experience and be really comfortable in front of the markers.
I think it was what my teacher Nigel said. He kept going on about how I should play the music rather than the notes. And it sounds a bit naff, but I think it's really important, because as a child you spend hours, or not hours, I was a bad practicer, but you spend a long time practicing scales and you go, what's the point of this? Blues scales, dominant sevens, arpeggios, you go, when is this ever going to be useful? And it comes to a point where you're getting to play these really exciting, interesting pieces, and they're fun to do, and because you've built up all of this ability to doing all the boring stuff, then when it comes the time to play it, you know it so well, you know your instrument so well, that you can just express yourself through the music and you don't have to worry about the notes and what they mean.
Before every single performance, my singing teacher always says sing from the heart, and I know it's like very cliched. Like, you got to treat every time you're performing, every time you're singing, every time you're practicing, you got to treat it like it's special, because if you miss the moment, then you're missing the whole point of music. And I think if you're just there in the moment enjoying it, not thinking about getting it perfect, I think that's when you'll really shine.
Because my program was very difficult, I would say, it was very demanding, not only in terms of concentration, but also all the notes and technical stuff that was all really difficult. So all the time I was really concentrated and focusing on all of the nitty-gritty details. And I never really saw myself from an audience perspective. So she always told me, don't forget to smile, don't forget to enjoy the music. And I think by doing that, by putting on a smile, it helps build that, relationship with the audience to show that, yes, the audience can also enjoy the music and relax, whilst also being able to put on a really good performance from a performer's perspective, where you're enjoying the music, you're playing the music. So I think that would probably have been the best piece of advice I was given for my performance.
Thank you, Narissa, Luke, Sarah, Matthew and Thomas for sharing your experience with the music students watching.